Welcome to Project Comedy, a podcast by and for military veterans doing stand-up comedy, turning military banter into quality stand-up comedy acts. We might be veterans, but our comedy aims to get everybody laughing. As military veterans, most of us have seen some pretty unpleasant stuff. By the nature of military service, all too many of us have been called upon to do stuff that most civilians would balk at. And we're not alone in that. Look at the other professions out there that are required to see the darker side of humanity, like police officers, paramedics, social workers. There are other professions that see nothing but the harder parts of life, indeed the ends of lives, like doctors, firefighters, and charity workers. Like us veterans, they've been exposed to the darker elements of life. So how do you deal with that and try to stay sane? In our military lives, we resorted to dark humour. And many's the civvy that would be shocked about the dark jokes and statements we've come out with. So can you use that stuff in a stand-up comedy set? Are you going to go too far? Are you going to take that step beyond shocking an audience and end up offending them, hence breaking the connection? To talk about why it's essential for veterans to have dark humour, but know when to bring it to bear or when to keep it at a respectful distance from the public, let alone an audience, I'm joined by Gabriel Pitch Black, It's Too Bright for Me Murphy, Jamie, turn the electric lights on please Johnson. We've also got Trev, Are you sure that's dark? Cowell, and I'm Jay. They've cut me electricity off again, Saunders. Evening, folks.
How are you doing, big man? You well?
Oh, living the dream, living the dream. Okay, so all the way through our service lives and into our veteran lives, we do adore dark humour. Why is it, do you think, that service personnel and veterans have a really dark sense of humour?
Well, according to psychologists, it's a coping mechanism. You use dark humour to, as an avoidance technique. So when something is really, something that can be quite horrific, you use the humour as an avoidance technique to stop you from having to face up to like the grim reality. So you can, kind of laugh it away and allow you to keep functioning. And obviously, as military people, you can go on from one, horrific thing to another. So you've got to be able to use some kind of coping mechanism to allow you to keep functioning.
I can double barrel you there because I was ex-military, but I was a paramedic as well. So I got like both barrels of it, like Ernest Hemingway. That's a cultural reference for you. and you'll be glad to know I haven't sworn
when you end up. It is that thing of when you see something absolutely horrific, you do need a way to separate yourself from it, and that's where the dark humor comes from, isn't it? It's suddenly, you're trying to normalize something that it isn't normal because we ended up experiencing it too frequently. So you've got to throw the humor in to try and make it normal within your community.
Oh, thoroughly. And like I said, seeing the things that we've seen and we've gone through, and like I said, it's literally because you've got no time. You can't like stop and pause and just say, "Hang on a minute, lads, just stop fighting a minute. My opera has just died." Can we have time out? Like, can we do a bit of a timeout, lads, while I have a little moment here?
Yeah, despite what the failed Capita adverts say, we can't just like stop for a minute and we'll have a little, ginganguli, a bit of a cuddle, talk about it.
It does enable you to do your job, doesn't it? That dark humour enables you to do your job, because if we didn't have the dark humour, you'd end up dwelling on those points at all times. As you said, you can't, in the middle of a firefight or a contact, suddenly stop and then go into a mourning process and what have you. You've got to carry on. And how do you carry on with the mission the following day? So the dark humour is there just as that coping mechanism, that ability to stay within the job and focus until such time as you can do that beautiful word, trim, where you try and deal with the emotional damage it's ended up giving you at a later date. At the time, you've just got to battle through it with whatever tool you can get.
And I think we talked about it on the last episode that when we talk about Blackadder, that's a really dark subject, and that people seeing traumatic stuff. And although obviously it's a sitcom, it shows the kind of because every squaddy loves Blackadder. It shows the kind of humour that people use to get through things, and and in real life, the humour is just as if not darker and more extreme.
And it's also that fact, have a look at what we did for a living and those other occupations. It enables almost like a group think, a group thought. It builds camaraderie that we share. Us servicemen share a really sick sense of humor, a really dark sense of humor, and that enables us to belong together as a unit. It separates us from other people.
Yeah. I've noticed, especially since I've left the service as well. Like, you kind of have to put the feelers out, like, just say like, oh, my humor is quite dark, and then they go, oh yeah, mine is too, and then you say a joke, and they just have this really ashen look on the face, and it's just like, maybe it's not that dark then.
But if you throw it into the comedy arena, I think it ends up building real loyalty at some comedians, because you'll end up with, some people love Frankie Boyle, some people love Jimmy Carr, some people love Bill Burr, but equally, there's a hell of a lot of people out there that absolutely detest them. It makes them really Marmite, and it almost breeds sort of like a community or camaraderie of fans around those particular comedians.
Definitely. I loved Frankie Boyle's joke about Jade Goody, is it? The one who died of cervical cancer?
The reality star that died of cancer. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, cancer's a rough subject, but wow. that was a very funny joke.
But I think it's about the audience, isn't it? You've got you go to a Frankie Boyle concert and you expect, jokes like that, and he expects his audience to be able to take it. If you don't like it, then that you shouldn't be going to a concert like that. And I suppose we've spoken about it before. It's just this whole cancel culture of being offended for the sake of being offended. But I'm sure, in generations past, the Blitz spirit and all that, I'm sure there was some proper dark humor, going on there.
There must have been.
But how people get offended as well. Like, you'd be surprised how stupid people are. Like, I remember after I qualified as a paramedic, I treated myself to a trip to Spain, and on the flight back, I heard a couple saying like, "Oh, did you have a good time?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was all right. It was very Spanish though." And I was like, "Really? Fucking Spain? Spain was very Spanish."
I bet they're the same people that go, God, what's all this foreign muck as they sat in a restaurant in Spain?
Yeah.
Why don't they speak English?
Do you ever see that list of? Do you see that list of complaints from Thomas Cook? Complaints they had genuinely been sent back, and one that sticks in my mind for just pointing out how stupid people are. It was a British couple from Birmingham complaining that when they flew back from the Bahamas, a family that they were staying with, an American family, only had a 3-hour flight back home, but their flight was 8.5 hours. And why was it so unfair? And they couldn't get the fact that America's a lot closer to the Bahamas than the UK. And they were complaining about the flight time differences. It's sort of like, how can you be?
I'm complaining about the global positioning of the country that I come from. Fucking hell.
They're probably flat earthers.
Yeah. Oh man, I remember as well.
One. Yeah, we've got members all around the globe.
I remember when I was in the army, I was serving with this fella who was that stupid. I actually said to him, like, "Mate, you're the fucking poster child for abortions, you." But then he came back to me and he said, "Oh, you shouldn't say that. My mum died." I said, "What, did she die of shame?"
You just reminded me of a really dark joke by a comedian that shouldn't have really have been that dark. Jethro. So Jethro used to, he did all the jokes about Denzel Pemberthy, because Denzel was so thick. And it's a really, really dark joke, and I love it because Denzel's mum went to go and get an abortion, and the doctor turned round to him and said, "Soon as he starts school next week, I think it's a little late." That's a really, really dark joke to be chucking into a family set. But it's not just servicemen, is it? I mean, the general public can end up chucking out some dark humour when we end up with either national tragedies and things like that, or just major news items. I mean, the two I can instantly think of, and I'm sure you've got examples. Let's take them in turn. You know where you were when it happened, like when Michael Jackson died. That day, how many jokes came out about Michael Jackson?
Oh, so many. The
one I remember, I was teaching the intermediate commander staff course maritime, and one of my students came up to me and said, "Have you heard Michael Jackson's died?" I went, yeah. And he goes, "Apparently he was doing a tour of a children's ward and had a stroke." That was the first gag I heard at 8:30 in the morning the day that news broke, and I just went, here we go, it's going to carry on for ages.
It's all, any sort of like big event, there's always going to be like these instant memes going around and jokes going around. I remember when was it Meghan Markle when she married William, which the one with the nice ass anyway. The one with the nice ass married William.
Married Harry.
I thought you said Harry had a nice ass.
Well, I didn't serve with him personally, but I can imagine.
Are you talking about Kate? Kate marrying William?
That was it. Yeah, Kate Middleton. And I remember there was a picture of the Queen giving her a fucking evil look, and it was something along the lines of, when you're planning to a car crash, but then you remembered you've already used that one to get rid of one daughter-in-law.
I remember the other one I remember. Do you remember the Challenger disaster? In Challenger, the space shuttle blew up just after takeoff, and it was the first time they had a school teacher, civilian, flying on the space shuttle. So there were loads of kids watching it, and the first joke that came up was, have you heard that NASA had to turn around to go buy a different form of lemonade because they can't get 7-Up now, but they've ended up with teachers on the rocks?
There's the old classic as well, isn't it? What does NASA stand for? Need another 7 astronauts.
That was the one. That was it. Need another 7 astronauts. Are there any others you can remember? Sort of like national things that came through, and instantly everybody was coming out with dark humour.
I think there was one. I think it was a failed IRA bombing plot or something, and
I had nothing to do with it.
They blew themselves up with their own bomb, and it was like, did you hear about the IRA pirates? And it was like, well, when the police got down there, they found pieces of 8.
What about in service? What moments or stories of dark humour can you remember about when you were serving?
I remember treating an Afghan National Army double amputee, and they casevaced him for quite a long distance at the back of a truck. So he kind of shut down, and there wasn't really any bleeding to the stumps, and they'd become really dusty. And the chief that I was working with at the time, we were in the middle of doing, we had about 3 casualties at the same time, and he said, "Don't them stumps look like a leg of lamb?" And you're like, well, yeah, they do. So it's like, right, I'll put him down for positive for mutton sign. And obviously, you find that funny, but you tell that to like people in Civvy Street, and they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like, that was Monday.
There's a beautiful story, and I've been assured multiple times it's true. There was a Canberra aircraft died. It was doing close formation work. So the aircraft crashed, and it killed killed the navigator and pilot on board. And when the pilot realized that there was no way he was going to be able to pull up from this mountainside, his last radio transmission was cancel 2 late lunches. and just plowed into the mountainside. I mean, that's dark, but fucking hell, what some amazing last words to come out of a pilot's gob.
I remember when we were in Iraq the first time. We took over this like factory, like building, just like a big warehousey thing. We set all the Hesco Bastion up all around the side of it, and there was this little dodgy looking outhouse type thing, and we kept on seeing people going in and coming out, but it only looked like it could fit like one or two people in it, and then that was it. We were doing guard, the duty swap over on guard post, and some fella just comes legging it out this building, gets halfway in between the building and our Hesco Bastion, and just fucking blows up. And obviously, OC came over the radio. I was like, "What the fuck was that? What the fuck was that?" And this Scottish fella, just as cool as you like, just went, "Some daft cunt just fucking blew himself up." Like, I was like, "Get that one." Went in there, and it was like a basement shelter thing, and it was just wall to wall mines and RPGs and all sorts of shit in there.
I remember when I was out in Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis, the first couple of days when we saw the impact of it, it really sort of like struck home to every one of us. It was, you're seeing people bleeding from the eyes, nose, ears. They're got dementia because the way the viral loads hit them and what have. They're basically dissolving from the inside out, and it hit us all hard, and we didn't know how to. And then suddenly, one of the boys there going, "That's it. We're in the zombie apocalypse. Who fancies watching Shaun of the Dead tonight?" And we ended up watching Shaun of the Dead over. It was a way to cope with everything we were seeing. We were trying to find, distance ourselves from the horror of what we were seeing, and suddenly going, "Yeah, it's a zombie apocalypse. So, right, who's going out with the baseball? Who's going out with the cricket bat? Are we going to be able to get into the pub? Was it the Winchester that was the pub in Shaun of the Dead? So that's what they ended up nicknaming our dining hall and what have you. And it was constant references and quotes from Shaun of the Dead just to cope with being out there.
Yeah, it's like you say. I mean, in most emergency services, maybe not the fire brigade because they're always asleep, but the ambulance service and the police, there's a lot of dark humour that goes in there. I mean, although it's not quite as dark as military medics and squaddies, but I was quite lucky. The team that I had in the ambulance service was mainly ex-Navy and ex-squaddies, so you could have a higher level of humour there. And then obviously when I went to the police, I was really worried about, would I constantly have to put this civvy filter on like maximum to not offend anyone? And it's actually quite refreshing to have people have a decent sense of humour, and there wasn't that much cancel culture going around. You just had to watch your back blast and things like that.
Well, I've got a good couple of civvy mates, and we go to Download, which is a heavy metal festival. One of the things that they did was just to stand up and shout things that were really, really offensive. So one guy stood up and shouted, "I voted Tory." And like a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's a bit out." Another fella stood up and goes, "I touch kids." It was just how much further you could go to just offend people and just be really, really out of order.
Is it me? Because it kind of surprises me when you look at comedians that are out there on the circuit. There's loads and loads of teachers. There's loads of guys that were sort of like in the building trade. But the occupations we're talking about, ex-coppers, ex-service, ex-paramedics, I can't really think of many that are well known on the circuit. And you would have thought with our dark humour and the fact that we spend our free time with our colleagues, or well, I say our free time, when we're trapped with our colleagues away from home, that we use this banter, we use this comedy, and they've not taken it to the stage. Can you think of any? Have you seen that, or can you think of anybody that's from our kind of background?
I can't think of any.
I think the only medical person I could think of is Harry Hill. He was a paediatrician, wasn't he?
He was a GP, but he says he was a bad GP.
Well,
that's why he ended up becoming a comedian, because he was a very bad GP.
There's Joe Brand, and there's that fellow who wrote the TV series. This is Going to Hurt. He did it as well. But I think the main reason why you don't get too many medical or ex-service people is because we're too busy drinking, doing drugs, or trying to kill ourselves.
And using that very great stereotype of what veterans and the other emergency services are. Maybe you want to be a stand-up comic yourself. So listen in for a second, and here's a link telling you how you could end up joining Project Comedy.
Make good choices, guys.
Are you a veteran, or even still serving, and think you'd like to give stand-up comedy a go? Then why not join us in Project Comedy? Visit the Project Recce website, that's projectrecce.org, then click on how it works. You'll find a Register Here button in the Project Comedy section. Fill that in, and the HQ staff will soon get you connected with the Project Comedy community and its weird and wonderful ambassadors. You'll be invited to our green rooms, where if you want it, we can train you in the basics. If not, you can just come along and have a laugh with us and see what we're up to and what it gives us.
Are there any elements of dark humour that you would want to use in your stand-up routines? Are there dark gags or what have you that you've encountered that you just go, yeah, that's got to go into a routine now?
I think for me, it's like just child abuse like that. I want to, boot in my stepdaughter and all
that. You're dining out on that, kid.
Again, I haven't done anything like that. Thank you very much.
The one I am going to be using, and it actually came out in this podcast, one of the earlier episodes, is when you, Gabe, turned round to me. We were talking about suicide attempts and PTSD, and then you turned round to me, how many gigs you done? And I mentioned it, and you went, fucking hell, mate, you're better at stand-up comedy than you are killing yourself. That is definitely going to end up in a stand-up routine. It's got to be fucking used.
It doesn't sound like anything I would say.
I mean, I'm linking it back into another topic we talked about, self-deprecation. I was thinking about, I'm going to do it because it's dark. So here I am. I'm 53 years of age, but I was adopted. I was given up at 6 weeks of age, and then at 6 months of age, I was eventually adopted. So I'm going to chuck that in there into, no wonder I can't date, because clearly, I'm adopted. I was so fucking ugly. My mother didn't want to keep me, and clearly she had run out of coat hangers. So I'm going to start chucking those kind of things in there, because, going dark about yourself is a good way to end up fucking about with people.
I'm working on a bit about linking in autoerotic asphyxiation with suicide attempts. It's like that's how I found out my kink.
Through suicide, I found out my true sexual preference.
Yeah, like I purposely go around looking for weak support beams, just so I know it's not going to work out.
It's like when does CPR become necrophilia? When you're both stiff.
Oh God, this is sick and it's dark. But I remember the first suicide we had that I had to deal with on a naval establishment. This young lad has hung himself, and then you've got to sanitize their room to pack it up and send it back to mum and dad. And we just couldn't stop laughing ourselves silly, because this boy had about 9 or 10 dildos in his room. And we're there going, How the fuck do you send this back to mum? Your son's just killed himself by hanging himself, and he's got more fucking dildos than a fucking prostitute. What the fuck are we going to do with these things?
I remember having to box up my mate's room, and this fucking knobhead said, "Well, what are we going to do with all his porn mags? We're going to send them back to his mum, is it?" I went, "Nah, I don't think anybody wants to see pictures of your man." Knobhead, though. Fancy asking that question, like.
I mean, I suppose that's another example of the darkness, using humour to get rid of darkness, but it's also dark. You're using dark humour to get rid of idiocy, because there are idiots out there, and you've got to throw the dark at them to get them into your way of groupthink. Rather than just going, "You're a fucking twat." Throw in dark humour, and you've got to take the humour towards yourself, haven't you?
Reminds me of that other medical joke. The difference between a rectal and an oral thermometer. The taste.
Yeah, so Jimmy Jimmy's told the joke. He doesn't claim it's his own. What's it? A nurse reaches into her pocket and pulls out a rectal thermometer and goes, "Oh, some arsehole's got my pen."
Oh yeah, that's a classic. I was actually saying to the missus, like I said, I can't wait actually until if this really kicks off and I become dead famous. I can't wait to see the amount of drugs or alcohol or kids I'm going to touch to fuck my life up. It's like, "Oh, I'm dead famous. Which avenue am I going to go down?" Hey, I'm pretty sure it'll be the drinking drugs because I can't stand kids. They fucking do me in. We were talking about it as well, like me and my mates. We were talking about like everyone who's got done for for touching kids and everything like that. Like it's really bad that Prince Andrew is a nonce. It's like it's not as bad that Michael Jackson is a nonce because we can still listen to the bangers that he put out. What's Prince Philip done? Prince Andrew done that? It's gonna take my mind off it while I'm rocking backward and forward in the fucking shower.
I mean, he obviously makes poor life choices. I mean, he used to fuck that ginger, so.
You knew he was a wrong'un. You knew he was wrong'un from then.
That's the same as Tony Blair. Tony Blair, you could, any man that looked across the room and seen Cherie and thought, "Fucking hell, she is a stunning piece of kit." He's got poor judgment. There's no way that man could take us to war because he's definitely fucking got beer goggles on.
I just got claptrapped, didn't I?
Are there any dark jokes that you wouldn't take into a stand-up set? Are there examples of dark humour you wouldn't want to use?
See, I don't really joke about anything that I've not personally experienced. So, everything like, doing the whole physical abuse and emotional abuse and everything like that, child abuse when I was a kid, all that sort of stuff. I'll go, I'll joke about all that. And,
isn't that called Sunday school?
Yeah. It was an incredibly sticky lesson.
Kept making me drink that holy water.
I think my limit would be if I thought, there are plenty of examples of things that we've joked about in the past. And I suppose my two rules would be, number one, if it would end up hurting, the family of somebody that's passed or somebody that's really struggling, then I'm not going to use that. If there is an impact it could have on that individual, or because I spent 23 years in the service, and I go back to when I first joined, a lot of the stuff potentially wouldn't fit in today's market. Some of the statements would be considered things like racist or homophobic or misogynistic. I mean, the classic being, we now call them baby Zeds. Suet puddings are called baby Zeds now, but they used to be, in years gone by, a completely different name that's massively inappropriate now. So I'm not going to revert back to those.
Yeah, but I guess Nelson had an armada to deal with, so he was less stringent on your humour.
He was a lovely bloke, though.
I think you've got to you've kind of got to roll with the times a little bit. Like, I mean, there's no doubt that everyone can get offended by like 90% of the stuff that comes out of my mouth. I say the other 10% is just me saying like link up words like and, then, and the. People are going to get offended by it, but as long as you turn around and just clarify, like it's not actually what I think, it's a joke.
Is there a line with dark humor?
I think
that's the whole point of dark humor, isn't it?
I think we've talked about it loads. It's always about knowing your target audience, and I suppose when you get to the stage where you're drawing the crowds because they're expecting that humor, then you don't have to look at who you're delivering to as much. But I think when you're first starting, it can be a double-edged sword. It could be a really good night, or that could be the end of your career, in one night. So,
yeah, I think this is why my career is probably going to be very short-lived. Me going in talking to a bunch of people who've lost children about kicking the fuck out of my stepdaughter or whatever.
So, are there any comedians on the circuit that you admire for their use of dark humor?
Come on, Jamie. It's about time you said something.
Jimmy Carr.
Yeah, just considering his last Netflix special was called Dark Materials.
Yeah.
It's still quite tame, I thought.
That particular one I did think was tame, but he hasn't been on the stage for 2 years. But he still got into a load of trouble for it, didn't he? I mean, did you see? Oh, there was that beautiful gag he did. It got him into loads of trouble with the wrong people. This was during the height of the Afghan and Iraq running at the same time. And he's talking about the number of guys that had lost limbs and what have you. And he went, but there's one great positive comes out of it. We're going to have the world's best Paralympic team. And the public went mental about it, but the servicemen thought it was fucking hysterical. It's showing that point of some people want to be offended, isn't it?
Oh, I think it's the social justice warriors there just getting out there. Like, I'm offended on behalf of the people who should be offended. It's like, nah, shut the fuck up, mate. It's kind of fair.
I'm offended by proxy.
Yeah.
I used to like old school comedians like Richard Pryor and stuff. I mean, he used to go about some real dark humor and he even is pretty similar to stuff that you and Gabe talked about. When he accidentally set himself on fire, he used to joke about that on stage. So he kind of back in the 70s was setting the bar for where you could go with it, but even his humor would be seen as possibly too much these days.
Yeah, look at Blazing Saddles. That was one of those films that they say, make Blazing Saddles now.
Yeah, I would be able to.
But Blazing Saddles, just going off on a tangent, Blazing Saddles, people go on about, the Mel Brooks film and the content of it, but Richard Pryor actually wrote it. So it was wrote by a black comedian, but people see the Mel Brooks white director, oh no, it's really, really bad. It's wrote by a black man, so he can make, he can make jokes about himself all he wants. So
yeah.
Well, what makes me laugh about stuff like anything else that's really bad, like you can make a song about it, you can make a film about it, you can make a TV series about it, but you can't make a joke about it.
Yeah, and then just those examples you were giving. Look at the producers. The producers. The movie. There they are. They're desperately trying to write something that's going to fail, so it'll get them out of trouble. So you end up making a musical about Hitler and springtime for Hitler in Germany and what have you. I mean, you don't get much darker than that, turning Hitler into a musical lead. And that was years and years ago, but people are getting offended about us telling jokes about guys and girls that have died or fighting in combat. Why is that suddenly dark and the producers isn't dark?
I love the idea that Hitler's turning in his grave because he's associated with dark comedy now.
You've got that Jojo Rabbit, haven't you? That Taika Waititi film where the kid dreams up his best friend to be Hitler. I mean, just that concept on its own is pretty dark.
Yeah, and Hitler's an idiot because it's seen from a child's mind, but because he's Kiwi, isn't he? But he's actually Jewish himself, so it's like it's okay. From the out in today's modern world, it's okay because he's Jewish, so he can make jokes about it, no matter what the jokes are. So
See, it kind of pisses me off because the only thing that I can joke about is a fucking priest fucking me as a kid. That's the only cornerstone that I've got. I get fingered by a priest. Awesome.
It's that other joke by Jimmy Carr when he turned around and said, there are rules to comedy and what jokes you're allowed to tell. So if you're gay, you can tell jokes about homosexuality. If you're a woman, you can tell jokes about misogyny, etc., etc. So those are the rules. So 3 paedophiles walk into a park. What about dear old Frankie Boyle then?
I absolutely adore Frankie Boyle.
Yeah, I think the fact that his whole career is based on, well, I suppose it's kind of more jock humor anyway. Because if you go on BBC Scotland and watch some of the Scottish comedy programs, or even BBC Ulster, and and look at some of the programs over there, the humor is different to that's on kind of mainstream TV for England, for example, England and Wales.
Yeah.
I suppose. Well, the BBC is have now tried to be more PC than PC, so you can't say anything funny anymore unless it fits in a bracket.
I love that TV series Frankie Boyle did on Channel 4, Tramadol Nights.
Tramadol Nights, yeah.
Yeah, that was ace. Was that where he said about Jordan's boy?
Yeah.
That's when he got into bother, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He's got so many memes and really, really dark jokes around him.
We mentioned this earlier that that there are these breed of comics that use dark comedy, dark material, and they tend to be in the public eye. They are very Marmite. You either love them or you hate them. Do you think that that's a risk you're going to have to play with? That if you start using dark material, dark humor, that you're actually going to polarize yourself with audiences. You're going to make yourself more niche. That only some people in your audience are going to get it and like you and connect with you. Is that a risk you're going to play with dark humor?
See, I think if you're going to limit yourself to, say, like dark comedy, you're only going to be in the same bracket as someone who only does like political comedy and stuff. Like, some people won't get it, some people don't like it. It's your own choices at the end of the day, isn't it?
When you say you've got, if you're of a certain, tick certain boxes, you can make certain jokes. I remember going to a comedy club in Reading, and there was an Asian comedian, and most of his jokes weren't funny, but there was one that got loads of laughs when he was just taking the piss out of himself by saying, I always make sure I get loads of room on a bus by taking a ticking alarm clock in a backpack. And that went down a storm. So.
See, in the 80s, that would have been my joke.
Yeah, bastards stealing jokes now.
That's not culture appropriation. I don't know fucking what is.
There was a lovely lady. I'm going to have to look her name up again. That I did my intermediate course. A young Muslim Asian lady on the stand-up circuit, and her opening line that she wrote for that particular set was, "Yes, I know what you're thinking of. You see me. I'm Asian. I'm Muslim. Relax. I'm not one of those. Look, I'm not even wearing a backpack." And I thought it was a brilliant way to disarm an audience from their stereotypes when she walked into the room, but it's still dark to start a set with.
Yeah.
See, I just go to all my stereotypes. I'm stupid. I love potatoes. I love drinking.
That's all the bases covered.
Yeah.
I suppose for me, at this stage of us being open micers, it's you've got to experiment with this stuff and see what lands in a room, isn't it? You've got to have a blend of style of comedy. You've got to have some that's family friendly. You've got to have some that's dark. You've got to have some that's rude. You've got to have some that's crude, and then see what's actually landing on the circuit at certain venues.
Yeah, see, and I liked how you left out. You have to have something that's clean as well. I heard you on the last fucking episode, bastards.
Why we didn't have you on it, mate? That's why we didn't have it on you. We noticed we were actually keeping our language down in the last episode. We would have needed a bleep machine.
I noticed you were struggling with it as well. You were like crack addict.
Yeah, I think the closest we came was me talking about Matthew Corbett sticking his fingers in Sue every day on daytime television. Apart from that, I don't think we said one swear word. Just because we put clean in the title.
Yeah, there was a lot of pausing and thinking about everything that you had to say before you actually fucking said it, though.
I think even as us delivering this podcast, we have to be careful about, we've probably got loads of real examples of real dark jokes that you would be suitable for the military, but you still have to think about, because of this is in a public forum, you could go to 0 subscribers overnight if you just let the cat out of the bag. If you took the Civi filter was completely ripped off and we put 50p in Gabe, then we'd be cancelled overnight.
There's a challenge.
Thank God for editing.
We get more Russian subscribers.
Yeah. Hey, at least we get to take down fucking America.
Hey, mate, they're our second largest audience now. The Americans are now our second largest audience on the podcast.
Oh shit, they're coming for me, aren't they?
Now they all think they're Irish now because they watch you, listen to you on this podcast.
All these guys in Boston.
Listen to an Irish fella.
I'm Irish now. I know Gabe.
Gabe the Bostonian.
I can understand 1 in 3 words, so therefore I'm fluent.
I know what Pog Mahone means. I'm in.
Me and my mate used to go up to the American USO, and it was a great release for us because we could just use normal British squaddy sarcasm. We would find it really funny, but they just didn't get it. I even broached my controversial 9/11 KFC joke with an American. Their commemorative meal that they were doing comes with two flaming towers, couple of hot wings, a big apple crumble for $9.11. And they were like, "Really? Yes, really, yes."
I was about to say either Jay's screen's either frozen or he's really offended by
that. Yeah. I was like, "Yes, I've got him at last."
Low tide again, guys. Low tide again. So hopefully we've given a few ideas of not only why dark humour could work on the stand-up circuit, but why it's actually important for veterans and servicemen to have a dark sense of humour to keep us sane. So hopefully we've given you a few ideas of not only what you could use in your sets, but hopefully encourage every one of us veterans to at least give stand-up a go. I've got to thank my co-hosts of Gabe, Trev, and the late arriving Jamie. Thanks, guys, for a brilliant episode.
Just standard RAF.
I've paid my hotel bill.
Well, time for team medals here.
And we'll finish off the way we always do with our social links and tell us how you can listen in and follow us for more. Cheers.
And remember, kid, you only get monkeypox if you go.
If you want to see what we're actually like on stage, please have a look at our YouTube channel. Search for Project Comedy, Veterans Doing Stand-Up, and look for our black and white logo that's exactly the same as the one we use for this podcast. You can also now follow us on Twitter. We can be found at Proj Comedy. That's at PROJ Comedy. I'm EJ Saunders, I can be found on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter if you look for Comic J Saunders. That's all one word with the letter J in the middle. Comic J Saunders. Thanks again to everyone that's taken part in this episode. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Project Comedy Podcast. Please support our veterans as they continue their comedy journeys. To find out more, including gigs our veterans are doing, please search for the Project Comedy group on Facebook, where you'll also find links to Project Recce, the veterans charity that makes Project Comedy possible.